Today's forum, Business Founders Talk Economic Indicators, is presented in partnership with the Entrepreneurs Organization of Columbus and will examine how our local economic climate compares to the global economy. We're pleased to present three very dynamic local business founders representing a diversity of industries in the premiere of this report. So please join me in welcoming Judy Huang, who's founder and president of 889 Global Solutions LLC, Matthew Vekasy, founder and president of Metropolitan Holdings, Angela Petro, founder and president of Caterers Contemporary Cuisine, and our able moderator and host, Tim Feran of the Columbus Dispatch. Tim, take it away.
Thank you, Bill. So predicting the future is a very tricky business. From weather forecasting to economic forecasting, getting the future right isn't easy. The best we can do usually is to look back at conditions in the near term and the present, and based on that, kind of suss out what the conditions will be in the near future, which of course is why Chris Bradley and Jim Ganal and Bill Kelly do much better in predicting the highs and lows temperatures for tomorrow, October 9th, than the high and low temperatures for October 9th, 2015. So this is why the new report from the Entrepreneurs Organization looks back in near term 6 months and ahead 6 months. It's far more accurate than trying to suss out what the next 6 years are going to be like. And if you want to predict economic growth, what better group to study than the drivers of growth, as we know, entrepreneurs. And that's why Judy, Matt, and Angela, who are in wildly disparate business sectors, are here. They're all entrepreneurs. And judging from the EO study, I would expect them all to be pretty optimistic about the next 6 months. The study, which is taken by EO members annually, says that in areas such as hiring, profits, debt load, and access to capital for growth, Columbus entrepreneurs are, by and large, doing a whole lot better than the rest of the world. And from the study, we can see that other cities in Ohio are doing pretty well, too, better than the rest of the world, by and large, although, here's the good news, not quite as good as Columbus. So let's see what our panelists have to say. We'll start by running through how each one of you started your companies, what the initial barriers were. Was it finding the right fit of employees, getting access to enough capital to prime the pump, complications of government regulations, taxes, unexpected expenses, or something else? And this will, of course, all apply to the study. So, Angela, would you like to start?
My biggest barrier was that I did not know how to cook. But as I figured out how to cook and deliver food, my biggest barrier was really not understanding how to have a relationship with capital. I bootstrapped in the beginning. I had no idea I would actually be starting a company that would be a valuable company, not a lifestyle company. And so the first 5 years were really not understanding that I needed to understand what capital meant to me and how to use it as a tool and how to get mentoring to use it as a tool.
Matt.
We have a very small company, and so I worked heavily in my own business. I have a lot of diverse skill sets, so I was able to perform a lot of the tasks. But capital was one. But I had a very close banking relationship that really got me started, and I've had kind of two along the way that have been a big part of my success. So,
Judy.
Yeah, well, our business works with Asia, in particular China, and I think I started the business here in 2000. At that time, it was difficult to find an audience that understood the type of services that we provided, being that it's very global, and being it's, Columbus and Midwest. But that was back, 15, 13 years ago, back at 2000. And in comparison, in terms of the government regulations, it's a lot simpler than starting a business in China, which I did in '93. There's a lot more bureaucracies and hurdles to override in comparison to starting a starting a business in China. So I think in terms of that, Columbus is a lot easier. And OSU has been a great pool of candidates for us to recruit staff and people. So all in all, I think it's been pretty good.
One of the interesting points of the study is that 65% of Columbus businesses, entrepreneurs I should say, are saying that in the next 6 months they'll be hiring full-time employees. Globally, that number is 35% of entrepreneurs. How does that apply to you, Judy?
Well, we work in supply chain, and we work with China in particular, like I said. We have needs to hire another 25% of our staff here, increase several numbers of full-time people. But we have 4 offices there, and what we do is we supply clients products that we bring over. So we have sales, project management, service of folks here. So in terms of the number of people, we're actually adding more in Asia, because that's where the manufacturing facilities are. And our folks does, inspection, quality control, and so forth. So in comparison of the 2 locations, I would say the U.S. office is hiring less than our international office is hiring more.
And what about the complications from the situation in Hong Kong? We discussed that a little bit over lunch.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I have been blessed to live in Hong Kong for a little bit and work there and went to school there. And I actually speak the dialect in Hong Kong, so I was born in a city close to Hong Kong, and I've been traveling back there for the last 20, 30 years, and Hong Kong's really changed a lot since 1997, when it went back to being domiciled or owned by China, mainland China, in terms of banking relationships, in terms of who's in control of the major government institutions, in terms of the freedom of speech. So I certainly see a receding of that situation, an increase of restrictions from mainland China to Hong Kong in terms of its private sector. So as I was explaining to you, Tim, that a lot of our, one of the factories we work with in Hong Kong is really concerned about expanding further in Hong Kong.
Which I guess makes, Angela, your situation a little bit less complicated seeming, but.
It's a lot less complicated. We are focused on hiring. We'll be hiring for the next few years. But I think what's more interesting is people in our industry are asking me about hiring. Do you have qualified candidates? From tiny little bakeries to companies our size, we're all sharing and pooling information about candidates. So it's not just my industry, it's the food and service industry in general that's really looking for people in Columbus.
So has that been one of the stumbling points, if you will, since you started the company, hiring competent people for what you do?
That was a huge problem for me 10 years ago. I was still trying to figure out how to be a manager, and I was trying to hire people who knew more than I did about their position. It's really difficult to manage someone who knows more than you. These days, we have a great reputation. People are coming to us to be hired, so that's changed a lot, and I've worked on my leadership and management skills, so I don't feel as intimidated to bring in the best and most qualified candidates that I can.
Has that been really the key issue that you've dealt with, getting the people, or?
In terms of growing the company?
Yeah.
It's definitely been up there. That and access to capital have been huge. Culture is so important in a company. It's not something I have to share with many entrepreneurs. We all get that. But building a culture in the food industry around our value system and then attracting people who are really going to put that face in the community has been huge for me. You know, when you're running around building a small company, you're trying to do everything yourself all the time. Then you need to bring in people who know more than you, but they need to act like you. They need to address your clients like you. It's really scary to send 100 people out every weekend and wonder, are they going to be me? Are they going to represent my company my way? So training has been something we've been investing in heavily to make sure the good candidates that want to work for us know how to be me.
One of the things in the EF study was they did break it down, full-time hires, part-time hires, contractors, and so forth. How does that all break down for all three of you?
Well, in our
Matt, go
business,
ahead,
we do all of our own construction. So we have a phenomenal project manager who does all of our construction. We have a great subcontractor team that we work with, so we sub out everything. But even they're struggling now to find quality help. Just plumbers, skilled tradespeople, electricians.
Every homeowner out there faces that issue.
Right.
Who do you hire?
And so we do something that I think a lot of small companies don't do, is that we pay our subcontractors on like a 25-day time frame, where a lot of the other bigger companies might be 60 or 90 days, so we really get their attention. We try to run our construction draw process quickly through about a 12 or 15-day cycle, so we can pay our subs quickly and we get really good service. But we're a smaller company, but and that's been huge for us. So we're also working on building our property management team, and those folks are really in demand too, because the multifamily industry is really strong right now, and so there's a lot of competition. So I think there's a little bit of wage increases in that position as well too.
So you'll be hiring in the next 6 months, full-time?
Well, we have a part-time girl who's really a rock star in our company. Just had a baby, and we're trying to get her full-time. So she's fighting that family battle right now, but we're trying to get more full-time people on our staff. So as we grow.
So has it been past access to capital, I would assume, is the number one thing for you? Hiring the competent people, has that been the next biggest issue?
We're very fortunate that we have really good people. And like I said earlier, my banking relationship, I work with a gentleman named Rob Mason at Insight, and Insight was recently acquired, for those of you who know, by First Financial out of Cincinnati. I've been fortunate to have a lot of successful transactions with Rob, and the new platform that they have. They can increase their legal lending limit and so on and so forth. So it really comes down to your relationships and your track record. And the more success you have, the easier things try to become. You build your reputation, and success just kind of follows along with it.
So access to capital, how is that going?
Well, when the financial crisis came in 2008, a lot of the bigger lenders just shut down any construction lending whatsoever. We all know that National City was acquired by PNC out of Pittsburgh. We had a condominium loan at that time, and we actually were under construction when the market crashed. So we've had to work through some of those challenges, my partner and I have. And our loan was with National City, and it was purchased, went into a workout area with PNC, so we actually negotiated with PNC to refinance the loan, and we're working through that. But a lot of the local community banks that had not were not as affected as badly, maybe didn't underwrite the same way, didn't have as much exposure to the crisis, came through it. And they're the ones that tend to work within this, the small community, within the small business owners, and so on and so forth. So it's really been great for us.
Judy, please.
I was going to add a little bit to what Matt was saying in terms of the PR, the people piece. I think the people piece has always been a piece that of all of my EO forum and EO mates I've talked to has been a biggest challenge in terms of finding good people and qualified people. A couple of our folks have come from surrounding cities within Ohio. They haven't really come from Columbus. And then we like to actually get some students from OSU as interns to start with, and then we would hire them onto then full-time positions. And I see some friends here who are in the HR professional business in the audience. That's also big in terms of having an HR. Our consultants that we hire or looking to hire is to somebody that's proactively there to look for additional talent within the company. But I think, having good people ultimately, you can deliver what you can deliver if you don't have good people.
One of our Metropolitan Club members has pointed out that a few entrepreneurs, probably not you, have actually failed because they've had access to too much capital. Do any of you feel that this could have been a problem or could be a problem in the future? I mean, it seems ridiculous, and yet, who knows?
I actually have a great story about that.
Yes.
So earlier in my career, I was buying out my original business partner, which is why we're called Two Caterers. There isn't another one now. Don't ask me about it. But I needed money. I needed money desperately, and I went to every bank you can imagine to get this money. And I literally had one banker say, I wouldn't touch you with a 10-foot pole. Okay, so I moved on. And then I had a banker who, I can't remember his name, and I wish I could. He sat me down and said, Angela, I could lend you this money, but it's the worst thing I could do for you. And I didn't understand in that moment. He said, you're confused. I'm going to tell you why. You have no idea why you need this money. You don't know what you're going to do with it, and you're going to dig a hole you can't get out of. Go away from me today. Learn why you need the money. Do whatever it takes to educate yourself, and then decide, do you want to be in business, and then borrow the money. This was 10 or 12 years ago, and it was a huge aha moment for me. So I think you can have access to capital maybe too earlier in your career, or not truly understand what you need to do with it and dig yourself in a hole.
Matt?
Yeah, I would add, on all of our projects, before we go to the bank and close our loan, we bid every single piece of the project out. So we know we've got as much of it under our control as we can, because there's a lot of things that happen during the construction process you can't control. So knowing how you're going to allocate all those dollars is really critical. Really critical. So just to go get a loan and not know what you're going to do with it is just a real slippery slope. So being prepared and well organized is really important, at least for us.
Judy, you were writing busily there. You got something, yeah.
Writing helps me to jot down my thoughts, but a couple of thoughts. I know we talked earlier about just the thought of venture capital and private equity or angel funding within the Midwest or Columbus, and how that's kind of different than the coast or other cities that are much more into that type of funding.
You're stealing my next question.
Oh,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
sorry. And I mean, I know there's an angel group here that John Houston leads, and that's a lot of, different kind of funding for startups with pre-revenue size. And, so is too much money early on dangerous? I mean, I think if it's, for me also, I think the pre-revenue size is kind of a testy time or rocky time, but I think also, like for us being established, if we had more of an active community on the lending side, although I see our banker Chase here, and they've been very good in terms of extending our line and so forth, but if we had more of a community of lending, I think it would really help us to grow with certain larger clients better, because we warehouse products and we ship the products, and if we didn't have that of a access to capital, it does restrict us.
Angela, we were talking earlier before lunch about the effects that the recession might have had on all three of your businesses, and you had an interesting thought about how it affects yours. Kind of counterintuitive, I think you said.
So in 2007, I was approached by a business owner whose business was about the same size as mine. We were on the edge of kind of breaking through that. Are we a lifestyle business, or are we going to be somebody who kind of is going for it in the market? And what happened is she thought, I can't make it through the down economy. So it was an opportunity for me to actually acquire a competitor who was had to make the decision, am I on my way out, or am I going to fight through? So while everyone was saying, hold your cash, don't make big decisions, we actually went for it and acquired a company that gave us a different market share than what we had at the time. So at the time, we were doing a lot of corporate catering. Well, that's what took a hit. Ice sculptures and corporate catering pretty much took the hit. So we were able to buffer ourselves by getting into the wedding market very quickly, which was a space we weren't in.
And so how's that gone?
We've not had a down year since before the recession, so it's going very well. But a down recession can open up opportunities for small businesses who are a little more nimble. We can take advantage of things like that. And also we have the ability to have the personal relationships to explore the market. Who's out there that might be willing to sell, that doesn't want to power through it? It's actually the second time we were able to do that.
Interesting. Matt?
Well, it's interesting. If you listen to what Warren Buffett says, his quote is, when the ducks are quacking, you feed them. So what that means is when the market's up and people want to buy stocks, you sell them. And so, in the real estate market, when we had a project in 2010, when the market corrected, we were able to acquire a small apartment community in Grandview, and we converted it to condos, and we put condos on the market, and we sold them and had a profit. We were a little early, but we bought the property right. So, a lot of people say, and they have negative mindset when the market's down and they're fearful. But that's the time you want to look for opportunities, because when prices are down, it's a great buying opportunity, like you were saying.
So how did you weather it? Was it all right?
We are still working through the condominium project that we have in Grandview. We've sold about 8 of the 20 units. The market's starting to come back. We work with Nate Kaplan at Cap Ohio, is the downtown guru of all urban condos. I mean, you ask a guy a question, he'll answer in an hour of everything he's doing. He's great. But we're still working through it. But our apartment side is really taken off, and we're very fortunate on the apartments. So,
Judy, you were going to say something, I think, about that.
Yeah, I serve the manufacturing sector. Those are my clients, and certainly through the recession, they have gone down in terms of their volume. But we're happy to say that our clients have been with us for 10 years because we're part of their supply chain, and so it's quite difficult to replace our products, or might take a long time to replace our products. So I think, and I think also for us, being that China didn't go through the same kind of recession as we did here in the U.S., that really made opportunity for us to actually expand our manufacturing facilities in China, because the lending community and the market in China is very different than the U.S. So I think, like Matt and Angela were talking about, that it's opportunities to really look for partnerships, and that's kind of what we did in our China facility.
One thing we were talking about at lunch, I asked you about why you're here in Columbus rather than elsewhere. Tell me about that.
Well, it's actually more of a personal story. I was born in China, and I came to the U.S. when I was 11, and I went to school in Boston, and stayed there until my early 20s, and went back to China to work, and met my spouse, who's from Columbus, and that's why I moved to Columbus to begin with, and that was back in 2000. So I follow my spouse here, but it's been a really nice community. Our church is here. We're part of the Columbus Foundation. There's just a lot of warmth. Even though the venture capital market is not that active, but the mentality of the people and the warmth of the Midwesterners is difficult to compare to East Coast and West Coast. So there's a lot of reasons to be in Columbus.
Yeah, when I heard the words global sourcing associated with 889, I immediately assumed, incorrectly, that there was some tie-in to our vast reputation as a retail center. And as it turns out, I'm completely wrong. Yes?
Yes, we decided not to go into the retail market. It's a market we didn't know a lot about. That's not also what our manufacturing facility had expertise on. So we actually focus more on the manufacturing. We do a lot in the healthcare space and the commercial food kitchen space. But yes, not in the retail area.
Very good. The survey, of course, looks at entrepreneurs. That's part of the title. Does this strike you as, is there a better way to analyze how things are going to be for the three of you in the next 6 months, rather than kind of osmosis, asking all the other entrepreneurs around the globe? Or
I would actually go back to the conversations that I've been having about labor needs, and it's anecdotal. This is an interesting community. When you're a small business owner, you create circles of other small business owners, and it is very much a mentoring, a coaching, an uplifting community to be a part of, and we share that information anecdotally. And being a true small business, I'm not in the tech industry, I'm not going to create an app probably that's going to solve some giant problem. I have a lot of conversations with small business owners about what they're facing. We all go through the same issues at different points in our career, but that anecdotal information and sharing the resources that we each gather along the way has been the biggest indicator for me. And being a part of the Entrepreneurs Organization, we have really high-level conversations about that regularly. So I can talk to Judy, I can talk to Matt, I can talk to 89 other people about what they're facing in very disparate industries. We're all going through the same thing.
interesting. So even though you're all three in, yes, wildly different sectors, you're facing the same things. Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. And not only is EO focused on business, but it's really your holistic life, your family relationships, your own personal well-being. A number of us were in Cleveland last week, and they have a regional event up there, and there was 350 people there. And we got to see Steve Wozniak speak, who was the co-founder of Apple. And, you ask the guy the question, and 25 minutes later, he's done answering it, I mean, and so there's some of the people that you meet, and the access, the information are just terrific. I mean, there's another gentleman named Peter Thomas there who touched me on a very personal level. He lives his life around certain values, and he's got a way of determining what those values are, and every decision that he makes is focused around those values. And I got to meet him personally, and he shared with the group, some great successes that he had. And he just said, well, here's my email. You can email me anytime you want. Call me anytime you want. So it's just like, that's the kind of community the EO is. And it's been great for me. I mean, I've got real close relationships with Cookie McIntyre's in my forum, and Larry Clark. They're both here today. I appreciate that. So it's a great forum. Anybody who's interested, I'll put my sales hat on, who has a business that's growing, it meets $1 million revenue, certainly reach out to somebody and learn more about what EO is, because it's just terrific.
Judy's nodding positively, so I guess you agree with that as well, yes?
Well, as another plug for EO, besides just a local Columbus chapter, like Matt was saying, there's Cleveland events, there's actually chapters in China, there's chapters in Asia and around the world, and it's a great reach out to lots of different people who are equally entrepreneurs in different cities or countries that you go to. They also have, education for entrepreneurs. We have they call it an EMP program. It's a 3 full day in MIT where different speakers come in and talk. And I've grown a lot through that program, from coaching, from how do you manage your people, from access to capital, to how do you hire the right people, how do you interview the right people, how do you retain the right people. So there's a lot of resources that EO provides that's outside of just the Columbus area as well.
So do all three of you feel confident now that you are mentoring or can mentor somebody in a similar position?
I want to go first because I've had a busy day already. So I started this morning with an 8 o'clock coffee, an hour-long coffee with someone from the Entrepreneurs Organization who reached out to me and wanted my advice on my industry. And then I got a phone call from someone in the restaurant industry who I'd had a conversation with last night about an employee issue I was having. And he wanted to follow up with me this morning with some additional thoughts he'd had about how I can mentor this young person on my team through a leadership crisis. So it kind of goes back to this community of, it's not just small business owners. I have 20 deep folks who want to see me succeed and are going to mentor me on a regular basis, and I'm going to pay that forward. And my husband's here today. Part of the conversation we had before this started was how fortunate I feel that people in this community look to me as a leader, and they also, those same people may put another hat on and look to mentor me in the same moment. That's a very powerful thing, and yes, access to capital is important, hiring is important, but how you're building your leadership circles, are you leading, and are people, do they want to shepherd you through the process, is the most powerful thing a small business owner can have.
So even though Bill Lafayette and I have talked endlessly about the investment culture here and how venture capital is much more conservative, shall we say, than on the coasts, the culture, as it turns out, from this aspect, is a huge plus.
I think those people have to want to help you.
Yeah.
You have to create a culture around yourself and your company where people want to step in and see you succeed. And there are some folks in the audience today who are from the Women's Fund of Central Ohio. I sit on the board of trustees for that organization. We have a lot of conversations about gender lens and how that's applied as a business owner, as a woman. This is one area where I feel like gender lens doesn't apply. I feel like I could be purple, and people are going to want to help me because I've created a culture around myself and my business where people know that I'm going to do right by everyone in my circle. So, if I had pursued a corporate track, I may be hitting some glass ceilings right now. I may be struggling with some of those issues. As an entrepreneur, it doesn't matter who I am or who you are. I know people want to see me succeed because I'm going to bring people along with me.
Matt, are you mentoring people just as avidly?
By the way, it's a great answer. I'm not mentoring anybody, but I've certainly love talking to young people who are trying to get into my business, and help anybody any way you can. And I guess I would add to what you said in terms of EO being we all face problems and we all face challenges, and it's almost like a support group because we all face these like challenges. And when something happens, it's great you can pick up the phone and say, well, how did you deal with this? Or even when you have, I have 3 young boys that are under 3, and I've got one of my other foreign mates that has 2 young girls under 2, and so I could certainly call and reach out to them, and having the family connection, and how do you deal with balancing all those work-life balance and all those types of things are really, really great.
Judy, how about you?
Yeah, I think much is expected by people that much are given. I think I don't know the exact quote, but I felt very blessed, and I think that is part of our job, certainly, to give back, whether it's to your company's employees or your colleagues, from internships or mentoring them to people who are less fortunate than you are, maybe serving in Rotary or being part of the Columbus Foundation, or just on a daily basis being serving to my family, to my spouse and my daughter. I think the mentoring goes not just within one circle. And in relation to EO, I know we have a WPO mentorship program, and I am working with a coach that mentors me within the business environment, and I work with a senior person within our church to mentor me within my faith. So I feel being an entrepreneur, it is a hopefully a complete picture that mentoring and mentee or mentor should take place in multiple layers.
I'm just going to interject here that in a few minutes we'll be taking audience questions, so please be thinking up a good one to put these people through the mill. And in the meantime, I'm going to continue with a little bit question here. One of the things that, having interviewed Les Wexner over the years, he mentioned in his early years as an entrepreneur, he was spending 60, 70, 80 hours a week doing his job, creating this great business, and then he found out that, maybe that's not the best way to go. And hearing all of you talking about dealing with your own mentors and mentoring other people and having kind of a balanced life, Les mentioned that actually it's best to do that, to have a certain amount of time away from the business, with the family, with community things. Are you all working 80 hours a week, or is it more of a balance?
No. I did that at one point in my career.
Mm-hmm.
There were times I worked 90 and 100 hours a week. I would come home, get 2 hours of sleep, and go back to work. And then I realized that if I could pick 4 crates of china up and load it into a truck rather than 1, I wasn't doing anything to work on my business. I was just loading vans faster and doing more work. So one of the pivotal points for me was, there's a book called The E-Myth. It's a book I reread every few years. And the premise is work on your business and not in your business. We've all heard that many times. It's easier said than done. But when you figure it out, and it happens in stages. So 1 month or a year, you're able to work on your business a little more, and the next year you get it a little more. And then you begin to actually trust the people around you, and then you draw better people to you because they don't mind being managed because you're not micromanaging them. It's a trust process. It's me trusting the people around me that they're going to represent me the way I want to be represented, but those people have to begin to trust that I'm going to let go. So my life is 100% different than it was 10 years ago. I couldn't have maintained that pace, what I was doing, for longer than I was doing it. I probably wouldn't be married, and I would probably, my husband is in the audience laughing right now. I wouldn't be married, and I probably wouldn't really have any passion for what I'm doing.
I would add to that, I'm kind of 80% of the way, well, maybe 80% of the way there, but I've spent an awful lot of hours working in my business, and it just comes down to pure profit and cash flow. And when you have the ability to, hire somebody and bring other people on, it is very challenging. But there's a lot of resources out there that can help you work through that. So, not easy to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is not easy to do. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, and me in particular, take a lot of our own identity through our business and how we do or don't do. We, define ourselves with that, for better or for worse. And I'm learning on a daily basis not to do that because, again, we are a complete person. There's, our families, our personal life, our faith life, all that. So. Through the coach that I've been working with on the business side, I've learned to extract myself more and more out of the operation. And we have what we call a morning huddle every morning at 10 o'clock. All of the folks within the offices get together for a 15-minute huddle and just talk about what's happening. And that's a good way to pulse it together where everybody's on the same page. And that's my way to also understand what's going on and also be able to let go. So it's definitely a progression, and I'm on the road to it. So.
Very good. All right. I'm seeing on the clock that it is time. It is the CMC's tradition to take audience questions. So we ask that you go to the microphone, state your name, ask your question, and we thank you in advance for avoiding editorial comments. And so the first question.
Thank you, and thank all of you for being here today. It's been fascinating. I'm a business owner myself, and so I certainly resonate and share many of the comments that you've made. Historically, educational institutions haven't done a very good job of providing a trained workforce that meets the needs of the real world. Is that still the case? And if it is, what suggestions would you have for institutions in this community, such as Columbus State, CCAD? I know Ohio State has quite a logistics program, Judy, that I suspect you get your interns from. But where are we in terms of really supplying the trained workforce that we need to meet the needs of the businesses in our community?
I'll jump in, I guess. When I started, one of the only programs in Columbus for the hospitality industry that we really could tap into was Columbus State. The Ohio State University has an amazing program now that's through the College of Health and Human Services. We've worked with their internship program and actually hired those interns for full-time positions. Columbus State has a great program that turns out very qualified chefs, and there's also a school that called the Bradford School, which is a culinary program where we've worked with them in an externship program and hired some of their students. So from when I started, and part of the problem might have been I wasn't aware of those programs other than Columbus State, but the Ohio State program has come along significantly. There's been a lot of interest in our community. Obviously, there's a big restaurateur community in Columbus, and they've invested in that program, and that program has given back to the industry. So it's been great for us.
I'd like to add that I got my degree at Ohio State in landscape architecture, and when I was there was a real heavy focus on technical skills in terms of being able to use AutoCAD, a lot of engineering focus. I have another friend of mine who's another business owner who has a civil engineering company who said that a lot of the civil engineers who are coming out of Ohio State now are not even learning how to run AutoCAD, because a lot of the programs have gone they're so theory-based, and there's that lack of real technical skills, which is really what you need when you're coming out of school, because that's really what business owners need, people that can come in and do those technical tasks. And so I'd love to see, kind of that type of thing come back. I know there's been a lot of that from a lot of sources, so just like to add that comment.
That's a little alarming. Judy.
Yeah, I'm thinking about our sector again, manufacturing. There's a lot of need within our local manufacturers here to find welders, people that make tools, or people that work in the shops. I have a friend in EO who's in the electrical business, again, being electricians. They're all having such a tough time finding, because it's no longer, quote unquote, attractive to have these kind of jobs, and I think a lot of the newly grads are with degrees that are difficult. So, I used to be on the board of Franklin University. I know we had a lot of courses that was added for adult learners in this kind of a space. But I think it is a matter of going to high schools and talking to high schools about how it's a good income, it's a good profession. but it's probably starting earlier than college.
We have Bill Lafayette with a question.
Bill Lafayette. There are statistics that come ultimately from community research partners that I have been beating half to death. And they show that small business creation in Central Ohio is nowhere near where it needs to be. And so my question to you is this: what can we do, whether it's government, whether it's community, whether it's the group of us who own businesses? What can we do to stimulate small business creation?
You know, the cost to provide benefits to employees is really high. I look back and I think to myself, could I do what I've done now? I think it'd be really, really very challenging. You know, we all know there's a lot of government regulations out there, and they just seem to as the years go by, they become tougher and tougher and tougher in terms of what the things that you have to provide. And so, you know, businesses have to make money. I mean, you can't do it if you're not going to make money, because you got to take risks, and all those costs they just add to it, and they limit you from hiring more people and growing, that kind of thing.
What about that, Judy?
I think back to what we talked about in terms of the culture here. It's more of a conservative culture, has pluses and minuses like everything else. You know, we've recently started working with the state of Ohio as a minority business. So I think from the state of Ohio's perspective, helping minority businesses grow, that's an initiative from the state side that's changed and been emphasized, and that's helping small business to grow. You know, within our EO chapter, we used to have 60 members, now we're up to 100 members. So, I mean, that number's grown, whether they've already been here as entrepreneurs or not. And then back to, I think, in terms of all of us is, you know, from the access to capital to the HR, all the issues we've talked about, just every one of us perhaps helping a startup with that, coaching, mentoring.
I'm going to answer this with my female-owned business cap on. This is a statistic that I'm hopefully quoting correctly, that about 1% of women-owned businesses ever make it to $1 million. 1%. So there's this huge pool of female-owned businesses that are in this startup stage or this lifestyle stage. So it's not so much what can you do to stimulate the startups, it's what can you do to stimulate women-owned businesses and any business to hit that $1 million cap, because it really is magical in a way. Momentum starts to happen, your numbers are different, and banks look at you differently. So how do you get those businesses, particularly the other 99% of women-owned businesses, to break that $1 million cap so that they aren't a lifestyle business where they're probably not employing anyone other than themselves or a few other individuals, to employers?
Hi, my name is Joe Campbell, and I teach and do research at Ohio State. But on the side, I have a company that I've been developing with 6 other partners who I met while going through graduate school a couple years ago, who are from China and Ghana and West Africa. And as we're developing our business, we're finding we're building relationships in Ghana specifically right now, and looking to expand into China as well. And you guys have mentioned some of the issues related to access to capital, and HR costs. What about legal costs? Where did you go? We're finding that to be very expensive. And where is it that you guys went to early on to get legal advice? And I don't know, maybe starting with Judy or anybody for that matter.
Well, luckily I'm married to a lawyer. That helps. I had some inside help on that. But, you know, the legal structure in China is very different than the legal structure here. Do you mean more in the Columbus area, or do you mean more in the international arena?
Well, both really. I guess either or.
Yeah, I mean, the legal structure in China is very complicated, so maybe I'll leave that aside. But in terms of the Columbus or the U.S. office, you know, when you start, it is bootstrap unless you have funding or venture capital, angels or whatever. And I think also it's back to what Angela said, is that pool of folks that are able to help you to succeed. And from our point of view, besides registering to start a company, that was the major type of legal assistance at first. I wouldn't say that there was a lot of time spent on the legal side. Banking was big, accounting was big, HR is big. So the legal side was not a big chunk of our initial expenses.
My mother worked for a law firm, so that helps. But I didn't have a big legal need. What specific are you looking for?
I guess right now, one of the issues we have is we've created a business in Ghana that's registered as an LLC, essentially, in Ghana. And so we want to create sort of an ownership structure. Sorry, we're getting real specific here.
Yeah.
Basically, how we create a relationship between our company here, registered in the United States, with the company that's registered in Ghana, without paying a lot of money for something that may not be all that profit producing in the long term anyway.
You could maybe reach out to OSU. They may have a resource for you. Or, any one of us might be able to help you as well offline to get you connected to some. We got lots of attorneys that are part of our group that could help you and maybe would spend a few hours with you to coach you through some things.
I'm going to expand on that for a second because the Entrepreneurs Organization is a global organization, and it goes back to mentoring and surrounding yourself by really smart people. So this is an organization where if I have a very specific question and I wanted to open a catering company in Ghana, don't, but if I did, I can actually reach out to companies globally and ask for those resources. And so mentorship, we've said the word 1,000 times today, but I cannot tell you how important it is that especially the more specific your industry is, the more important it is that you have a knowledge base around you, people who've been there and done it. So joining an organization where you can get that support on a broader level is huge.
And one thing I want to add on the legal side is I think it's important to find a lawyer that is very business oriented versus just, trying to look at documentation and write you a contract that nobody's going to agree to. I think ultimately as a business owner, it's trying to look for that synergy or that business relationship or that opportunity and have a legal help that is having the same thought process.
Hi, Andy Campbell. Thanks so much for being here. I think I'd like to ask you a question that I think Bill touched on a little bit. But in general, I believe we see government as a barrier to jobs and to business. If there was one rule or policy that you could change in your industry, what would you change?
I can start. How do you guys think? Or we work in the healthcare sector, so FDA is a big government gorilla for us. And I think with this administration, it's gotten even more complicated in terms of product approvals, in terms of lead time, in terms of all the paperwork that's involved. I think some of it is necessary, some of it is not necessary. So, and it is very important to make sure that the product is safe because it is our health we're talking about. So, but I think when it gets to be so large that it makes it difficult for small or even medium-sized companies to be successful while they wait for their clinical trial products to get approved, then it becomes prohibitive. And so therefore, that's why the bigger companies are buying the smaller companies, and smaller companies never get to a medium-sized company because they run out of cash.
One challenge we have when we develop projects is to go through the zoning process. And I'd love to see the city come up with a form-based zoning code as opposed to so specific. And what form-based is more focused on, you might have a building, for example, that may have 5 units in it, or it could have 2 units in it, but it really shouldn't matter how many units are there. It's just really the shape of the building and if you can meet the parking requirements, just to try to simplify it, because you've got to hire, every time you go and develop a project, you've got to hire a zoning attorney, you've got to work with the city. It takes a lot of time and a lot of money, and it could just be a lot simpler to go through that process. So,
Did you have anything?
Not really.
No. All right, very good. All right, before we go to that, let me just very quickly, since we've looked at the past 6 months and the next 6 months in this study, very quickly, 6 years from now, go wild. What do you think? How is your individual business going to be 6 years from now?
I'm going to go for it.
Yeah.
I've been doing a lot of thinking about that. Obviously, we're going into a strategic planning session for next year, and part of that session is going to be what's 3 years, 6 years, and 10 years. So in the last year, we actually invested in our own building after 17 years of being in business, which has opened other doors of opportunity for us. So actually 2 years ago, when I joined the Entrepreneurs Organization, I went into that thinking, I have a little catering company, and it'd be nice if I could run it a little better. And 2.5 years later, I'm thinking, sky's the limit. World domination, we're taking caterers. So, but the next 6-year projection for us is that we're going to look at expanding the market and probably pursuing some of the things that larger companies that are doing on a nationwide basis may have left a little space for. So maybe some of those companies have gotten too big to manage some things, facility management, some of these sports contracts that are a little smaller perhaps than what national companies are interested in. There's an opening in the space, and we see ourselves pursuing that.
Matt, you'll be the king of Grandview in downtown?
I haven't done any projects downtown, but my goals are really short-term in nature. I'm trying to finish a project I have in Grandview. Like I said, I've got a big demand on my family side, so I'm really trying to focus back to the balance we were just talking about, trying to take care of my family over the next 18 to 24 months and finish this project, and then I'll probably reevaluate kind of what I'm going to do next.
Good.
So now I feel bad about world domination. Yeah. So he wants to help his family, and I wanted to take over the catering world.
And speaking of world domination, though, Judy.
I do not want to dominate the world. But there's one thing that we learned. It's called a BHAG, which means big, hairy, audacious goals. So we are taught to have those. And the ones that I have is that we'd like to grow through M&A, so maybe buying companies that are smaller than us to make us bigger, and then hopefully working more within the venture capital, private equity, angel market within the Columbus community to grow more within Ohio.
Thanks. Bill, you're on.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's forum. It was really fascinating. We certainly encourage you to continue the conversation in the lobby over coffee and cookies. And remember that you can view and share all of our forums on CTV Columbus Television, on WOSU and PBS affiliates statewide through the Ohio channel, and anytime you like on CMC's website via YouTube. So once more, thanks to our partners, the Entrepreneurs Organization of Columbus, and our speakers, Judy Huang, Matthew Vekasy, Angela Petro, Tim Feran, and thanks to all of you for being here. We look forward to seeing you at CMC again soon, maybe tomorrow. Thanks, we're adjourned.